America, we stand for freedom. Though freedom is never really free, we yearn and strive for government protecting our liberty.
Welcome to Your Right to Know, presented by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. My name is Mary Lotze, and I, as well as our FRCC member and friend, Steve Morin, will be your host for this evening's show. Tonight we're going to change up a little bit. We're going to have sort of a different format than what you may be used to. We're going to have a panel discussion utilizing members from the Fitchburg Republican City Committee, but also special guests from the Mass GOP. So tonight I would like to introduce all of our guests. I have in front of us here in the pink shirt, we have Frank Ardinger. Frank is Worcester, Middlesex County District Chairman of the Mass GOP, and he is also a member of the Leominster Republican City Committee. We have Susan Smiley. Susan is a member of the Board of Selectmen, actually you're vice chairman of the Board of Selectmen of your town of Lancaster. You're also the Worcester County, I always get this mixed up, Worcester Middlesex Republican GOP for the Mass GOP, your chairperson. I am so sorry. Ray Younghans is chairperson of the Orange Republican City Committee. And then we have our local expert, Professor John Strang. Dr. Strang has been with us in the past, and we consider him our go-to expert as we rely on him for all things Republican and logical thinking. So are you all ready tonight? You ready to go?
Yeah, ready to go.
Well, then we're ready to go. Fasten your safety belts because this is going to be a fast discussion, a very fast 30 minutes. I'll start by asking the first question, and I'm going to actually pose this question, Ray, to you. And I just kind of wanted to know, I wanted to get a sense of Gabriel Gomez's success out in the town of Orange. You actually had a meet and greet with Gabriel and Mike Sullivan and Dan Winslow back in April, mid-April, before the primary. How did you work that out? You had a wonderful meet and greet. I saw it online. Just a large group of people came out. We know Gabriel Gomez won that primary. How did you work with the people who were impressed, maybe with all three candidates, but selected their one candidate? How did you work to bring everyone together?
Well, first of all, when we look at Orange, we're very rural. And there were ads in local newspapers in a 50-mile radius of Orange. Also with community affairs in newspapers. I went into those. Gardner, Fitchburg, even down into Ware and Belchertown. I had a radio interview on a radio station WGAW from Gardner. And they actually came to our meet and greet also, but a week before the meet and greet, they interviewed me on a telephone interview.
Now, how did you, so after the meet and greet and then after the primary where Gabriel Gomez did prevail, how did you bring all of these people together to solidify their votes behind Gabriel?
Well, at the meet and greet, each candidate was given 30 minutes to present his program and to take questions directly from the audience. And they answered very specific questions about Obamacare and the gun regulations. Primarily, that was the major interest. And each candidate gave his views. The AOTV in Athol, our local station, documented this meet and greet. And later, after Gabriel won the primary, used his portion of the meet and greet on a weekly broadcast. It was almost every day it was broadcasted
Okay.
to the community.
Now, obviously Gabriel won there. Numbers, how did he do in your town of Orange?
And I'm going to use two towns.
Okay,
In the town of Orange, where we have about 4,700 registered people, primarily we have 65% of these population is unenrolled.
okay,
And in Orange, we had a 25% voter turnout on the election day. And Gabriel Gomez took 57.7% of the vote, Markey 41.5%.
okay. Now that's Orange. How did Athol
And
do?
Athol, we have about 6,600 registered voters. And they had a 23% voter turnout. And Gomez won by 917 votes as opposed to 603 from Markey.
Susan, how did Lancaster do?
So in Lancaster, we had roughly a 32% turnout, which I think was very well. I was
Yeah.
pleased with that.
Yes.
Much higher than we expected. And Lancaster took Gomez 61% with a 38% for Markey in the last election.
Frank, Leominster.
I'd have to say Leominster was fantastic because we only have 2,800 registered Republicans in the town of Leominster, and Gomez got all 2,800 of those votes plus a couple thousand more. I'm just kidding, but
No.
no, he took 60% of the votes in Leominster, and Markey got 39%. That was we only had a terrible turnout because we only got about 25% turnout, so
Yeah.
it was really low.
John, how did Fitchburg do?
Fitchburg had a total of 20% voter turnout, so it wasn't that good. But in terms of how Gomez did, he got 55 plus percent of the vote, 2,395 versus Markey's 44%, 1,900. So it bears out what happened throughout all of these areas,
Sure.
I think, in North Worcester County.
Sure.
Yeah, if you look at the results for all of North Worcester County, almost every town was above 55%. We had some as high as 66, 67% of the turnout, going for Gomez. The unfortunate thing is Boston had 79% going
Sure.
for Markey.
I want to give Stephen an opportunity to jump in, but one of the things that I was looking at that struck me as I was looking at some of these numbers on my own was that if we compare and contrast this election in 2013, this Senate special election, with the Senate special election that happened in January 2010 with Scott Brown. Although Scott Brown also won those same towns, he won it by twice as much. Why do you think very quickly twice as many people came out to vote in January 2010 for Scott Brown than came out to vote for Gabriel Gomez in June of 2013?
Scott Brown had a very unique set of circumstances. Number one, he had a great message. It's the people's seat. I think we
Yeah.
all remember that,
Yeah.
not the Kennedy seat. And then he was going to be the 51st senator to vote against Obamacare. So certainly was a unique set of circumstances, but the thing is, you had people, as you alluded to, Mary, the middle of January, going out to hold signs for Scott Brown and stuff. He
Many of us did.
energized the base
Yes.
in a way that we haven't seen in many years.
Sure. Stephen, I'll let you.
I've got a question for everyone here. It seems that we've really had a low voter turnout in the recent elections. We have heard many excuses from the Boston Marathon bombing that took an emotional toll on the voters, the reigning spring candidates, and unexciting and uninspiring, the debates were boring. So basically, how can we get more voters to get engaged into the political process?
That's a fairly loaded question. To answer a good question, certainly, I just want to go back. I think that the turnout this time around, my perspective is people were exhausted from the election in November. The previous election, a lot of activity that kind of went sleepy, but then came about a little too late, I think, in the springtime, very busy time for most folks for various reasons.
Yeah.
But to go back to your question, the duration and this special election, I know it was trying to be combined with a lot of different town elections, which I think, again, to my point about being exhausted, I know myself, I was running,
Right.
and a lot of people were running locally, and that's what we were challenging our Republican base to do.
Right.
And so therefore there was a lot of energy being tapped into the local elections, which is a positive thing. So it's a combination of many different things. How do we get more people? Well, we just have things like this, and we get the word out, and we keep our outreach moving.
You also, Scott Brown, his message was so much more powerful in 2010. I mean, he had a clear, decisive, differentiation between him and Martha Coakley. Gabriel Gomez, on the other hand, when you listen to him, there wasn't a heck of a lot of difference between him and Ed Markey, and that's, I think, is he needed to generate that excitement a little bit more that Scott Brown Scott Brown had. Plus, this election, the way it was designed, and I think it was designed deliberately, it was a very short time frame for an election of this caliber, and that gave Markey, with all his millions of dollars already in the bank, a leg up. So Gabriel was starting out from a very deep hole and trying to catch up.
Well, it's actually interesting that you point that out, because I do have a question here a little bit farther down, and it actually says that Markey spent more than $8.6 million on his race, and that was the number that was calculated till the about June 5th. So it's still 20 days before the election, compared to Gabriel Gomez's $2.3 million. That's a pretty wide disparity. Let me throw this out to all of you. A question. How does the Republican Party, or any of our good candidates, and I do believe Gabriel Gomez was a good candidate, how do we overcome money and people? We're the minority party. How do we, as Republicans, overcome money and people and win elections?
We may not be the minority party. Statistically, I know we only have about 11%. But if you look at the 60% of unenrolled voters in this state, the majority of them, through my experience, seem to be Republican-leaning people. And we have to do, as Sue said, do programs like this, get the outreach out there so that we get those people engaged and get them involved in the elections. Scott Brown was able to do that in the first election. He got the vast majority of the unenrolled voters on his side. This time, I don't think the unenrolled voters really gave a darn.
I don't think they came out.
They didn't come out.
In numbers. They did
Right.
not come out in numbers.
Right.
And I think that that's an important point, is that, again, the exhaustion maybe from the November election, the disheartenment of the results of the November election, and people just, they need to know and feel that their vote is so very valuable, and that you're going to resonate that message face to face, discussion to discussion. I think that the Facebook and the technology items are very, very helpful, but at the end of the day, I think it really, you have to have that discussion. You have to make that contact with the voters.
Yeah.
To second something that Frank here said, I think that Gabriel could have emphasized more significantly the differences that he had against his opponent. To compare him with another Hispanic Republican, Ted Cruz, in a recent article addressed just this question. He said essentially that you have to paint a clear contrast with the Democrats. Don't paint yourself in pastels. And he quoted Margaret Thatcher, "First you win the argument, then you win the election." He said every domestic policy we think or talk about should focus on how we differ from the Democrats. And there are stark differences across the board. The most vulnerable people in our culture, young people, Hispanics, African Americans, single moms, have all done worse under the Obama administration. Too few Republican candidates, and I think this had to include Gabriel for all his qualities, emphasize that. There should be much more emphasis on the differences. Sometimes you get the feeling that the Republican candidate is just too tepid in where he stands, and you can't do that. You're just going to turn off too many of the unenrolled.
Sure. Stephen.
That leads right into my next question. As far as getting Massachusetts Republican voters to come out and the unenrolled, what's the proper message to reach out and get these voters to come out to the polls and vote? And that's
Yeah,
my
I think we have to emphasize the differences in the party between us and the Democrats. You know, the Republican Party, the GOP, is really the party of growth, opportunity, and prosperity. That's the focus, and we have to make people realize that we're talking about the economy and we're talking about jobs. We're not talking about, you know, how we are going to, you know, subsidize people, which isn't bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but you have to sit down and say, look, we're going to give you an opportunity to grow and get jobs, not having to be dependent upon the government. And that's what people really want.
Ray, what do you think? What turns people on and gets them out in your neck of the woods? You're more rural than we are here.
Identification of person. Again, every time you open a newspaper, you see the face of a Democrat. You don't see that of a Republican. And what we did in Orange, primarily, where we have, as I said before, a 65% unenrolled population and a 13% Republican, we did an extensive lit drop. We did 1,000 families in Orange and brought the message in. And as you can see by the numbers that we did, again, we're a small community. But we brought those people out by presenting Gabriel Gomez to the people, both in a lit drop and on television. A repetition, not over a month, but over a 2-week period. Every day he was on there. People didn't get bored, but they got acquainted with him.
That's a very interesting thought. The old come into your living room, almost the fireside chats. John, have a question for you specifically. We're trying to sell a message. Conservatism for the Republicans, and we're trying to still get that group of unenrolled voters who tend to be less conservative. How do we sell a message of conservatism that attracts the Republicans, but it's not so conservative that it turns off the unenrolled and we grab from that pool?
First of all, don't prevaricate. Don't apologize about being a conservative. It's not necessary to focus, if you're, for example, a social conservative, it's not necessary to focus solely on that. But you would share with unenrolled people who are not social conservatives certain principles. For example, opposition to excessive government, the idea that America became a great nation on the basis of private initiative, in favor of small business. These are all factors that would influence favorably an unenrolled person. Just go on the street, or if you have an occasion to speak to somebody who's unenrolled, ask them, are you in favor of increasing the size of government? And 10 to 1 is that they're not. They simply, in many cases, don't know sufficiently, and they have the misimpression that Republicans, for example, are across the board people in favor of vast corporate wealth. This is not the case. Most of us, I don't think, are corporate businessmen here. None of us. And that's probably true of people in our committees. You know, we're acquainted with small business persons. So I think that's part of an image that we probably have to get away from. And there's support for this, by the way, in some recent polling that I can go into if we have time for that.
Stephen.
Now I've got a question for you guys. According to the stats I have here, Gomez won 56% of 361 small cities across towns in Massachusetts. How do we Republicans begin to make an impact in the biggest cities like Worcester, Boston?
I'll give you an example. It's somewhat, not directly addressing that, but there was a recent election out in California in which it was a heavily Spanish district. This was from the Washington Times about 2 days ago. It was a heavily Spanish district, and there was a Spanish, Democrat running, and it should have been a knock for him. But the Republican won. He was a white guy, white Republican. Why did he win? Because he, as Sue mentioned, he went to their houses, he went to everybody's house, as many as he could, and knocked on the door, set it on their front porch, set in their living rooms, set in their dining rooms, in their kitchens, and asked them what they wanted, what they were looking for. You know what the overwhelming response was? Jobs and the economy. Right. They wanted jobs in the economy. And that's what the Republican Party represents, and we just have to get that message to the inner cities.
I can actually add something to that. I brought the article
Please, John.
Okay.
that Frank is referring to. His name was Andy Vidak, and he's fluent in Spanish, although he's not Hispanic himself. And indeed, he did just as Frank indicated. He adopted a common sense approach. He emphasized job creation, affordable energy, and opposition to big government in an area in which 60% of the population is Hispanic. He went out day to day, and there were many volunteers, Spanish-speaking volunteers also, who assisted in this. And he defeated Leticia Perez, in this heavily Hispanic area. So we can indeed speak to Hispanics. Another, to add to what Steve's question here, I guess this is sounds sort of flippant, but if the question is, what can we do if the big cities go to Democrats and the small cities seem to go to Republicans, I guess one answer is lure the people out of the big cities. This applied to me. I moved here from Boston about 10 years ago, and I like it a lot.
Yeah. Well, but that whole thing actually goes to what Ray had said about bringing the candidate right into the living room. Now, in the small rural communities, perhaps the best way of doing that is to bring them in on the cable access TVs and through the newspapers and those kind of routes going door to door. But in the big cities, you may not have some of those same access or opportunities, but you can go and have the large public forums and going through the communities with the locals in the communities representing your candidates.
I think the key to a lot of that is what you're talking about, Mary, is the local committees, the local Republican committees, ward committees, whatever they are. If they take some of those same strategies that Ray adopted in a small town of Orange and do that in Boston, the message will get out. But it takes active Republicans. It takes people to get on the ground and willing to go out and knock on those doors and give that message to people directly.
And Steve, I think we've talked a little bit about we've talked a lot about the Hispanic community. I think it reaches far beyond that. It's the Vietnamese, it's the Asian community, the Cambodians, the Brazilians. I mean, all of these people come to this country, and they want to start. They work hard. They sacrifice. They do things the way things were done a long time ago. All we have to do is get out and talk with all of them. And as well, I think it's equally, if not more so important, we've got to get into the colleges. We've got to get into the schools. We've got to get into the colleges. The young people coming out of college, high school, they're registering Democrat. My husband's a registrar of voters. He sees it. They don't know the difference. All they know is what they're taught in this core curriculum activity in their school systems, and so we've got to find some more innovative ways to reach our youth, because they're workers. And I worked with a lot of the young folks in my town, in my district, for the Gomez, and they were working hard, and they were excited about Gabriel.
We should bear in mind, though, that during Reagan's administration, young people were going Republican. They were registering Republican. That came to an end during the senior George Bush administration, probably because of the read my lips comment and the perceived reneging on that. So it can be done. You can get young people.
Yeah. A local example is actually the state reps race up in Gardner this past year. The high school advanced placement program in government allowed the students that worked on the campaigns to have that count for their final exam. And they had a number of very young high school age students working on the campaigns, and the majority of them, I happened to meet one of the people last night, the majority of them, I think it was something like 16 out of 20 were Republicans. And that's amazing, so and that's how we have to do it. We have to get to those kids in high school and get them out there so we can understand, but because they work hard. I mean, they make up for probably 10 of us out working.
Sure.
Yeah, my next question was about the minorities and what to do to get them to vote. Obviously, you guys have already answered that, so I guess we'll just move on with Mary.
Okay, so my next question then is really going to be, what is the Mass GOP doing? What is the Mass GOP doing in light of our recent losses, November, and now again in June of 2013? What is the GOP's strategy to start working with not only the cities and the towns, the local people like us, but the big cities, and start making these changes and getting these changes?
You want to go first?
I honestly don't know. You know, you gave us a promotion in the introduction because we're really not the chairman of the Mass GOP. We are just state committee man and state committee woman. But I don't know that there's a definite strategy. Maybe there is. Maybe you have some insight that I don't have.
Yeah, I think there's our chairman. She's a female, young gal, city councilor out of Quincy, and she is working with the youth. She's working across the board. We have a young gal up in the north Haverhill, Lawrence area that was recently elected, Leah Cole. They found her, and they're working with Carol Claros
in
in
Worcester.
And again, a young woman, single mom. You know, we're finding candidates and finding people that are willing to make that sacrifice to run. So I do think that, you know, it may be behind the scenes. We have a very active candidates committee for which a gentleman, Luke Noble, is doing a lot of hard work. We've got a very active committee on the Mass GOP. So it's happening. It's 11% we've got to work with. So I think we have some room for improvement.
Sounds like we're going to have you all back then to talk about the what's going to happen.
2014 will be a very good year.
I would like to thank you all again for coming with us tonight. And that's it for tonight's show. So I would like to thank Frank Ardinger from Leominster, Susan Smiley from Lancaster, Ray Younghans from Orange, and John Strang from Fitchburg, and certainly my co-host tonight, Steven from Fitchburg Republican City Committee. Your valuable input. The discussion was taking time to be with us tonight, and we really appreciate it. It's through friends like you that's helping us grow a stronger inner core in North Central Massachusetts, certainly. And I'd also like to thank the viewers for tuning into Your Right to Know. Our goal is to provide insight, information on the Republican Party and on our candidates so that when our voters go to the polls, they will have better information to make informed decision about their particular candidates. We're coming up on local elections. Although party affiliation is not really a consideration when voting for candidates in local election, this fall the FRCC will be supporting and helping local registered Republicans who are running, as well as conservative-leaning unenrolled candidates. By coming to our monthly meetings, we will begin introducing and discussing these candidates and introducing the individuals to you. In addition to this show, you can hear the FRCC on the radio, WPKZ, local radio station, the first Thursday of every month during the 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. morning drive time with morning host David Martinez. WPKZ can be found at 1280 a.m. and 105 FM. This program, Your Right to Know, can also be found on our website and Facebook pages. When you're thinking of what to tune in and what you want to know, we always say, as we say goodnight tonight, that we always stand for freedom. We want you to remember that we are always here for the American-loving, flag-carrying people, and we wish you all farewell. Thank you. Bye-bye.
America, we stand for freedom. So let us all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might.